It's time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. I'm Will Aubrey. My buddy Joe Darnold joins me now. And it's time for our moment of what?
Lead off, Will, because I want to hear what yours is. Yours are pretty good.
Well, the problem with that is I really hadn't thought about it until just now. So I was going to let you go first and come up with mine while I let you go first.
My moment of what comes from the ranks of women's college basketball, where Kelsey Plum, Washington Huskies, passed 1,062 career points. Now, unto itself, that is not newsworthy.
Okay.
But here's the part that is newsworthy. She did that in a single season. One season, 1,062 points, set the NCAA Women's Division I record, breaking Jackie Stiles' records for most points in a single season. 1,062 points, Will. That's almost as many points as you have behind the three-point line for your career. That's a lot of points. That is a lot of points. I don't care.
That's got to be 30-plus points a game.
I'm doing some easy math right now. If she played 30 games, it's 35.4 points per game.
It's a lot of points.
That's Pistol Pete range. You are now in the Pistol Pete range of scoring, which is absurd. I mean, once you get to that level of scoring in college, you're in rarefied air. You know what I mean? You're at a point where you're like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty incredible. I saw that and I stopped and I said, what? That's a ton of points. My gosh. And for a team that's not great, Washington's not great. It's not UConn. You know, I mean, it's one of those, you go, well, Washington, okay, all right, they're all right. 1,062 points. Goodness. It's a lot of points, Will.
Well, I'll talk about women's basketball as well. I came across a video that someone had shared on Facebook of Gino Auriemma, and they were talking about how what he said was great, and so I started it, and I was afraid after a moment or two that it was going to be another one of these videos that bashes millennials for getting participation trophies
right.
and that
Which
kind
is
of thing.
not true, by the way, but...
Well, of course, it's not true because people have gotten participation trophies for like ever, and you know,
and what generation gave those trophies? Because when I was a 9-year-old, I didn't buy my own trophy.
No,
my dad's generation bought the trophies and gave them to us. So let's not go bashing millennials, etc.
1969, I'm in 7th grade on the basketball team. Everybody on the basketball team got a trophy. It's nothing new, and the parents who complain about participation trophies are running in 5Ks and getting medals and ribbons just for running. Yes.
Congratulations.
So, I don't want to hear. Anyway, but the Gino Auriemma video was actually terrific because what he was talking about was the importance of cheering for your teammates and body language. And he said if you're going to sit on the bench and sulk or sit on the bench and not pay attention to the game, then you're not getting in. Ever, he says.
Yeah, I saw the same video, and I was really impressed by his emphasis on body language. Because body language is how you express to your teammates what you're thinking and feeling. People don't seem to put any... one of the things that I used to gripe about during his freshman year was Cameron Payne. Early in the season, his body language was terrible. If he missed a couple shots, or if he had made a pass and somebody didn't score, or if there was a turnover, just dropped. And you watch him, you go, Cam, you gotta get your body language right, because you just watch the whole team kind of deflate around him, you know? Now, by the end of his freshman year and into his sophomore year, it was the exact opposite. This is a guy who walked in with confidence. He was rah-rah behind his guys. I'll always remember the game at SEMO where he fouls out in overtime after a huge comeback and a last-second three-point shot. There's a foul. He hits the free throws. It goes to overtime. SEMO had the game completely won throughout the second half. The Racers come back. Cameron Payne fouls out. And you just immediately think, oh, great, we're going to lose this game. He goes onto the sideline, and the team keeps fighting, and the first guy off the bench during timeouts to go and give high fives and go and give props to his guys for doing well was Cameron Payne. And you go, this is a world of difference when it comes to physical approach to the game. That ability to buy into your teammates' success is, you've got to have it.
Absolutely. It makes a world of difference.
It really does.
Scott Sivils used to say it's all about relationships, and he was right. And if you have a strong relationship with your teammates, then their success is going to be as important to you as your success is.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes teams go.
Absolutely. And you didn't think, no, everybody wants to talk about this team, but this is the part that I think made the team so good. The team that went and beat Vanderbilt on the last second shot in the NCAA tournament, that was a team from top to bottom. And reading Jeff Bidwell's book, which I can't recommend highly enough. It's a fantastic book. He talks about how De Niro wasn't shooting well his senior year. His percentage had dropped. He was down to 30%. I mean, he really wasn't. He still scored, but his percentages were down. The team was almost unselfish to a fault. You know, you have so many guys who can score. You got so many guys who are double-digit. I think they had 5 guys who were double-digit scorers and 1 guy who scored like 9.7 points a game in Isaac Miles. I mean, it's just one of those, you go, there's no team that should be this unselfish. And then you watch De Niro, whose scoring had just gone down and down and down by his senior year. It wasn't because De Niro wasn't the same player he was his senior year, you know, compared to his sophomore year or junior year. It was because he recognized that the team needed something different. His role needed to change. And all of those guys recognized that. Isaac Miles, that guy could be a 20-point scorer a night. No problem. But that year, he only averaged 9.7 because that's what the team needed to win. That is a testament to what a great team can be.
And talking about Murray State brings us to the topic that we will discuss today. Forwards, the greatest forwards in Murray State history. And we should first discuss how we're going to define the position.
Absolutely.
And I think for the purpose of today's discussion, we leave post players out, and we just talk about
that's tough.
Talk about pure forwards, and then we'll deal with post players next week. How does that sound to you?
I think that's pretty good. It's going to be difficult. Some of these guys. First off, we're talking about the best players in Murray State history. So you're talking about guys who could do multiple things at a very high level. Now, we're going to go through, and I hope people who are listening to this, I hope that they send us feedback, because I didn't get to watch all these guys. You know, I go a lot from the stories I've heard, from the data that I can find, and so when I think about these guys, if I represent them incorrectly, if I say he's a forward and he should be a center or a post, let me know.
Absolutely.
Talk about it. Let me know about it. I want to hear about it. I can be wrong. Will can't, but I can be wrong. So as we're looking at these guys, if you hear something that sounds a little hinky, if you remember watching, Les Taylor and you watched him play and you go, no, that guy's definitely a forward, or he's more of a post, or the offense they ran had him as the 5 instead of the 4, let me know.
Clearly, the best forward to ever play at Murray State's Jeff Martin. He is the all-time leading collegiate scorer in the history of college basketball in the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, and a matchup problem really for his time. He was a player. The one thing I can say about Murray State and what they've done is they always seem to be anachronistic. They always seem to be out of their time element. I mean, you think about the teams that have played and the greatest players that have played, and you look at Jeff Martin as a great example. Jeff Martin was almost an anachronism. In '88, he was the big, long scoring wing that really swept all of college basketball in the 90s. Guys like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's a 6'6", 6'7", 2 guard who could play. He was long, he was very athletic, and he could shoot. Jeff Martin, not Michael Jordan, I'm going to say that right now. But fit that mold. 6'7", long, athletic, good with the ball, incredible shooter, and really was a matchup problem for a lot of teams who couldn't match up either with his size or with his skill set. And anytime you have that, those guys just stand out. And Jeff Martin, absolutely on the list. I mean,
couple of stories
goes without saying.
About Jeff Martin. When he first came to Murray State, and I forget who the fellow was that tortured him in this pickup game, but he first came to Murray State and he's playing in a pickup game with some of the guys on the team. And there was this one guy who every time he would come down and hit a shot on Jeff, he would say, "Merry Christmas." And of course, Jeff went on to be just a phenomenal player. I have one other anecdote. Probably the only time he wasn't picked first in a pickup game.
Oh, God.
I was playing basketball at Carr Health, and I got to pick. And I didn't know it was Jeff. I mean, I didn't know. And so I had the first pick, and all I knew is he was this tall black guy, and I was a shooter, and I wanted somebody who'd throw me the ball. So I picked my buddy, who's about 5'6", instead.
You went for a point guard.
Yes.
Over size.
Right. You could look at it that way. And so the
only question
Jeff
I had, was
the,
there an open tryout beforehand, or did you go in this and just go, well, I don't need size, I do need a point guard?
No, I didn't go, I need a point guard. I want somebody who will throw the ball to me and let me shoot.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, they killed us. They killed
really?
us. And at the end of the game, I asked the black guy, I said, what's your name? He said, Jeff Martin. And, obviously at that point, you know that you've made a serious mistake. And I talked to Jeff about it years later, and he said, you made the right choice. You weren't getting the ball if you were on our team.
And you know what? I wouldn't have blamed him even a little bit if he didn't. Oh man, yeah. Jeff Martin's got to be up on the list. The next name that has to come up, and I don't know exactly where you want to put him, is the pride of Dresden, Tennessee, Ronald Popeye Jones. What Popeye Jones did, his personal story, is out of a movie. In fact, I don't think if you tried to pitch the script of his real life, of how he was an under-recruited player out of a tiny town in West Tennessee.
Played shortstop on the high school baseball team.
At 6'8", 330 pounds,
yeah,
or whatever it was. You look at him and you go, there's no way you'd get the movie made. It just wouldn't happen. People look at it and say, yeah, that's passé. There's no way that happened. Nobody will believe that. But here's a kid who was under-recruited, who gets an offer from Murray State, comes on campus. You look at him and you go, this kid, yeah, he's big, but my God, he's never going to play D1 basketball. He didn't have the wind. He didn't have the strength. He wasn't super athletic. He couldn't jump out of the gym. And you watch the personal transformation he makes from his freshman year to his senior year, and all of those things about him were true. He wasn't super athletic. He wasn't a guy who was going to jump 40 inches off the ground. He wasn't a guy who, in fact, I don't remember him dunking a whole lot.
He did have great hands.
But the softest hands and the best feet for a guy his size. And a guy who just transformed his body from 330 at 18 to 270 or 265 and athletic and just all-around dominant player, one of the greatest players to ever play at Murray State.
No doubt. Now, people may think of him as a post player, but if you think back to that team he was on, he took about 1-3 per game.
Yeah.
Chris Ogden, who averaged 7 rebounds a game for that team, never took any threes.
Right.
Chris Ogden was the guy who was limited to just playing in the low post. He was really the post player on that team. And Popeye was more of a power forward. And the game against Michigan State,
I posted a link to that on the Racer Fans board. I hope people get a chance. It's the whole game, and it's fantastic.
Well, he tortures Michigan State with 3-pointers from the top of the key in that game.
Well, and you know what the best part about it is? His game, if you look at it, looked so simple. He's a 6'8" guy who could get really good post position, and he did against a guy who was 7 foot. The Michigan State center was a big guy, 7'1", and was a good player in the Big Ten. What I saw him do, and one of the plays that I saw him make, and he did it seemingly every time he touched the ball, was he sealed his man on the post, got the ball from the wing, got it above his head, arms fully extended, and in one movement turned around and shot it, never brought the ball down.
Right.
It's so simple. It's something that every junior high coach teaches his junior high post players. God made you big. Don't take the ball down. Be big. And you watch him do it, and not only would he receive every pass in perfect position, his touch on the shots as he went up to shoot was silky smooth. I mean, just amazing.
And the amazing thing, though, is how few players learn that simple lesson.
Agreed.
Don't bring the ball down. I remember one of the first guys that I remember seeing who would keep it up high like that's Purvis Ellison.
Yes.
And he would never bring it down. And when you're 6'11", why would you?
Right.
It allows guards to defend you.
That's your area.
Yes.
You know, if you're 6'11", the area above your head, that's no man's land. That's yours. Nobody can come and get that. You take it down low, it's everybody's area. 5'10" guards can start taking the ball from you. And that was just an amazing thing that Jones did so well. An amazing player.
James Singleton belongs on the list as well. Now,
Agreed.
James averaged a double-double when he was at Murray State. He only averaged 14 points a game, so we're not talking about somebody who would compare perhaps offensively to Jeff Martin or Popeye Jones or someone like that.
No, agreed.
But he did average a double-double. And unless the record has been broken in recent years and I have forgotten it, he holds the record for most three-pointers in a game without a miss at Murray State.
Yeah, what he did in that game, I believe it was against EIU.
Yes.
What he did in that game was incredible. And this is a guy, it's not like he shot a ton of threes in the offense before that. You know, he was a post player. Not so much that he stayed on the block, but he was a face-up forward. At that point, whenever he stepped out, it was just like, you mean he can do this? And you start looking at the guys and go, why don't we do this more often?
The interesting thing is I talked to Rick Samuel, the Eastern Illinois coach, after that game, and I told him, you know, Singleton won the three-point contest at Fan Jam at the beginning of the season, and he said, why didn't you tell me that before the game?
Well, and since that time, Singleton's gone on and played in the NBA, played overseas, has been one of the best players in the Chinese league, which is a high-dollar league that NBA players like Stephon Marbury have gone on to play in and dominate. He has been a journeyman professional, but everywhere he's been extremely successful. This is a guy that you can tell that his skill set has kept up with him. He is a fantastic basketball player. It deserves to be on the list. My next guy is Claude Verdon. Now, Claude Verdon played 67-70, and he played with Jim Jennings. No, I'm sorry. That's Stu Johnson. No, Claude Verdon, 67-70. Now, I don't know if I would call him a post. He's a little undersized for that, but he averaged 20 points, almost 21 points per game for his career in 3 years. He was all OVC, Player of the Year in 69. The guy went on, he was drafted by the Sonics and the Colonels, the Seattle Supersonics in the NBA, and the Kentucky Colonels in the ABA, went and joined the military instead, came back out after the military and blew out his knee. Never had the pro career that he probably should have had, but fantastic basketball player. I don't know if I call him a post. I don't know if I call him a... This is one that I want you guys to make sure you check me on. Claude Verdon, is he a face-up forward, or was he a back-to-the-basket forward? Is that what we're talking about with this guy? Let me know and double-check on that one.
Good point.
Who you got?
Isaac Spencer.
Ike. Now, here's the funny thing about Isaac Spencer. He was an undersized power forward.
He was.
6'5", 6'6"-ish. Coming out of Alabama. And I've heard...
And before he hurt his back, he was a high-flying dunker.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah. And the anecdotes that I've heard, and I don't know if they're true, so I'm going to just give them to you, and if someone can give me some clarity on them, then I will. I have heard that there were multiple SEC schools interested in recruiting him out of high school, but they were all afraid that he wasn't going to qualify. And so when I say multiple SEC schools, I'm not talking about, Mississippi State. Alabama wanted him. Kentucky wanted him. But they were all worried about his qualification. And he comes to Murray State, and
he did have to sit out.
Did have to sit out a year. And really, that leads to the next level of the stories. There were a couple guys that were recruited on that team that were going to have to sit out. And instead of just not playing any basketball at all, they went in and played intramural basketball. Now,
that's right.
The intramural rules said that if you had received a scholarship, you had to wait 2 years from that time before you could play again. Play in that sport in the intramural leagues. Well, technically, those guys were not on scholarship. They were paying their own way and sitting out a year.
Right.
Which meant that they were just like any other student on campus. And so when you look at those guys, you start thinking about, this is the intramural team. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was Rod Murray, Isaac Spencer, Aubrey Reese, and I believe a couple other guys. I can't name them.
I don't know who the other guys were, but imagine if you were one of the other guys.
You know what? That's the kind of team I would need to be on. All right, Darnold, tell me about your role on the team. I set screens, and sometimes I inbound the ball. What else do you do? That's it.
Here.
I run back on defense. That's my whole job. If the ball comes to you, what happens? Well, somebody's made a mistake, and I need to get rid of the ball as fast as possible. Those guys.
Yeah. Did you ever playing pickup find yourselves posted up down low against somebody who was 6 inches taller than you?
Yes.
And they throw you the ball, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with it?
It's one of those where, you know what you do? You pretend hard. You turn and head fake. And then just try to get rid of the ball. Because honestly, that's what it would be like. So those guys, they just swept through the intramural season. But what's more, those guys, whenever they wouldn't go to practice, would consistently wipe the floor with the starters. And the starters were no slouches. They won an OVC championship. And your freshman team that's ineligible, that can't play, just mop the floor with them about every practice. That's how good these guys are. And the best player of the bunch was Isaac Spencer. This guy could do everything. In fact, his senior year, he came back from the Prop 48 granted a waiver, and he had his fourth year back. Coach Anderson, in an attempt to try to boost his draft status, because he did care about him, he wanted him to go and be able to play professionally, moved him out of the paint as a face-up 4 and more to the wing as a 3.
And that was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
It did not suit his skills.
It didn't. Now,
and they went away from it late in the year.
Right, and he was still good on the outside. But on the inside, you put him inside the three-point line, and he was devastating. He was one of those players that you could not find a way to stop him. Teams tried. They threw everything they had at him and couldn't stop him. And that's saying something.
I pointed out it was a mistake.
Yeah.
The reason that Coach Anderson did it was out of loyalty to Isaac Spencer.
Absolutely.
Because he knew that if Isaac was going to play in the NBA, he was going to have to play small forward.
Absolutely.
And so he wanted to give Isaac a chance to prove to scouts that he could do it.
Right. And he was good, but he was not the great player he was whenever he was playing his traditional face-up role.
Still, he did average 21 points a game as a senior.
Yeah, that's how bad he was. He averaged only 21 points a game as a senior. He has to be in the running for one of the best forwards of all time at Murray State. I mentioned this guy earlier, and I think I'm going to put I'm going to mention two guys at once on this one, okay? Because these two guys, I think... Let's start with Joe Fulks, okay?
Okay.
Joe Fulks played 41 to 43 and was a very good player at Murray State. Played at Murray State at about 6'3" in the 40s, which is a fairly large guy. So he would have been a face-up four or a wing type player. Came out of Birmingham, but because of the dam being built and so on and so forth, moved to Catawba, played Lyon County, and was called the Catawba Clipper in high school. He goes and joins the military as part of World War II and gets put on their exhibition team going around playing and cheering on troops, and grows 3 inches. So what was a good size for a small school 6'3" turns into a good size for any school 6'6". And he's been playing nonstop in the military. He comes out of the military and gets a $10,000 signing bonus to go to the NBA for the Philadelphia Warriors, and was unbelievable. What he did in the early NBA was nothing short of miraculous. This is a guy who had scoring records for a long time in the NBA. This is pre-shot clock, pre-3-point line scoring records. This is a guy who averaged 20-something points a game in the pros. Was an early proponent of the jump shot. Was an incredibly good shooter. The likes of Red Auerbach talked about how good he was. And of course, Red Auerbach won so many championships, considered one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time with the Boston Celtics, known for his cigar and stuff like that. But he talked about what Joe Fulks did and how he could do what he did. The man was a scoring champion in the NBA. He scored, in one of his years, he scored more points on average any given night than other teams' top 2 scorers combined. This is a guy who revolutionized professional basketball, to the point where the people called him the Babe Ruth of basketball, because he did things that brought people in there. He single-handedly got the city of Philadelphia to build a bigger basketball arena. He brought this national media coverage, and let's call it what it is. He's just a country boy from Birmingham in Marshall County, a town that, might I add, no longer exists because it's underneath the lake. You know, he comes out and for 5 years is the preeminent basketball player in the world. He has to be on the list.
I'll toss in Cuthbert Victor.
Cuffy.
He was one of the most efficient players to ever play at Murray State. He shot such a high percentage from the field. He did not have a lot of moves that he would use to score. Mick Cronin called him a try-hard guy, and he did not mean that in any way to be derogatory. He put it this way. He said, Cuffy tries hard all the time, and a lot of the points that he scores are effort points. Yeah. It's because he's constantly playing hard and trying to score.
Yeah, when you look at a guy like Cuffy, now this is another guy who has about as much folklore going on about him as there are factual statements about the man. I mean, the rumor was that he was 16 when he first got to Murray State. 16-year-old kid. He was eligible because he had graduated to high school in the Virgin Islands, but was 16 years old. They had him listed at 6'6", and people I've talked to said, it's closer to 6'2 and a half, 6'3".
Well, Cronin said he measured him without shoes 6'3 3/4".
So you look at a guy and you go, well, that guy can't play forward. He can't be a forward. And then you go back through the stats, and the stats are amazing.
Perfect game on his birthday.
Perfect game on his birthday. And if he was 16 when he first got to campus, he was only like 19 when that happened. You know what I mean? Or was when did that happen? His second?
I think that was his freshman year.
His freshman year. Well, then
I think it would have been 17.
At most 17 years old. You know, in Division I basketball. He has the single season record for blocks. He was an incredible rebounder. And we're not talking like he was 240. I mean, he was 6'3", probably 210, but got every ounce of his potential out of every play he played. This is a guy who could leap out of the gym, but got great position down on the. I mean, he would seal a guy, and the guy stayed sealed. You know, he played against some really good players, and he was able to just hold his own and do whatever he needed to do. His professional career afterwards was another one of those journeyman Europe globetrotter kind of things. He went on to play in some of the top leagues in Europe. At one point, he was in Greece, which was considered one of the top 3 leagues in European basketball, and went to Spain. And in Spain, they called him the Greek god, because even at 31 or 2, whatever it was, he was physically in better shape than half the players half his age. And that's incredible.
He was the guy that if you looked at him, the way he was cut, you would think he was a bodybuilder.
Absolutely. You want to talk about a guy who's pound for pound one of the strongest players to ever play at Murray State. And that's saying something, because we had some guys who were some pretty, you think about Ed Daniel. Ed Daniel's one of the strongest guys to ever come through Murray State. And size-wise, nothing to write home about. I mean, you look at him and you go, no, he's all right. He's good size. And I watched him shut down guys who were much bigger than him, beat them on the boards over and over and over again. Cuffy Victor was even that plus some. I mean, he was not as big as Ed Daniel, height-wise, but he would just put up stats. Fantastic basketball player. Great attitude. I mean, you never heard anything negative about him. He's a really just a good basketball player. Has to be on the list.
Absolutely. And we'll continue the list in the next episode.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of guys still left to go.
Let's go ahead and briefly talk about the NCAA tournament. And my bracket, I got off to a fabulous start, 15-1 the first day. And then it took a turn for the worse. And it got really bad. For a long time, I was undefeated and tied for first. Like, in the evening of the first day, I was tied for first in the country.
So for a good 8 hours, you were the greatest bracketologist.
Tied for
the greatest bracketologist in the country.
Last time I looked, I was 12 millionth.
Oh, well. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, Will. That's, golly. Villanova losing.
That was a shock. I couldn't believe Duke lost.
Duke losing, yeah. The problem is, Duke, the writing was on the wall for Duke all year long. They had lost games they shouldn't have lost this season. They had, I think, 8 losses on the season.
Yes.
Coming in, which is a lot of losses for a team that's a top, as a 2 seed. But they're what finance guys call high beta. If they're playing well, they're better than any other team in the country. If they're playing poorly, which is something that can happen, they are mediocre at best. And those kind of teams are tough to deal with. I mean, when you're talking about a Coach K team, that doesn't happen very often. But when it does, oh man, boy, they were just.
And of course, everybody has taken delight in bashing the Atlantic Coast Conference because they only have one team in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
I would remind those people that last year they had 6 teams in the Sweet 16.
I think it's all biased because you've got 73 chances to get those teams in there. So I mean,
one thing that has troubled me, I watch Mike and Mike.
Yeah.
And I
Northwestern
have seen,
and Notre Dame. Something to remember.
Yes, I have seen, particularly Greeny, complain and complain and complain about the officiating in the tournament. And the truth is, it's been pretty darn good. Now, have they missed a few calls here and there? Sure they have. But a lot of the times, when people think a call has been missed, it's because they don't know or understand the rules.
Right.
And, I mean, the rules are also pretty complicated.
Well,
But,
and they've gotten steadily more so
like
over the
ru-
past 5 years.
Like the rule on traveling. If somebody passes you the ball and you catch it in the air, and one foot lands before the other, in that situation, you cannot take a step before dribbling. If both of your feet land at the same time, then you've got a pivot foot, and you can take a step before dribbling. That makes it so complex
Yeah.
that it's difficult to see in real time.
Right.
And so anyway, I think the officiating's been as good as it ever is. And I saw this morning, and this astounded me. Viewership's up 34% over last year.
Yeah. And that's the problem.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it hurts me and it pains me to say it, but they've emphasized scoring. They've de-emphasized parity. Now, that's not to say that there hasn't been parity in some of these conferences, and they've played to the largest common denominators. Quite simply, I mean, if you want 20,000 people to show up or watch a game, put Kansas in, put Kentucky in, put Duke in, put North Carolina in. What they don't say, and what we haven't seen from them, from the NCAA at this point, is the gross underseeding of mid-major teams, which I think has everything to do with money. And by underseeding those teams, they might win the first round game. You look at Middle Tennessee State, they might win the first round game, but it really hurts them in the second round game. The biggest thing to remember with that for Murray State fans is the year that Murray State is the last undefeated team in the country. They go and they get a pretty terrible seed, 7.
It was 6.
A six, and their second round game was against a 3 seed against Marquette, and that probably shouldn't have happened. Quite honestly, you're looking at one of those situations where the seeding actually worked better for Murray State against Vanderbilt as a 12 because they then stole the 5.
Right.
Whereas you look at what they did in the year where they earned the 6, they probably should have been a 5 or a 4, which means the team they end up playing is markedly different than the 3 seeds. Marquette came out of their conference that year and were one of the better teams. I think they were underseeded as well, not so grossly as Murray State, but you'll find that. I think the other thing that you're dealing with here is that by emphasizing scoring, you de-emphasize the things that basketball purists like, and you emphasize the things that passing fans enjoy. It's part of the reason why, as you watch NBA basketball, the skill level goes up, but the watchability goes down because the points are worthless now.
And I want to make a quick comment on the NBA before we wrap our our sports section up.
Yeah.
People have no memory, it seems, and maybe it's because I don't know. But for example, all of the talk about Golden State over the last couple of years and how radical their approach to the game is really annoys me because it's not even new to Golden State. People who were around 25 years ago remember Run TMC with Tim Richmond, and that
was a fun team to watch. They were a lot of fun to watch. That was
Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullins. They played the exact same way this team is playing. They want to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers this year before the injuries, and Golden State as 2 of the greatest teams of all time. I got to tell you, you put either of those teams up against the Lakers or the Celtics from the 80s, and the Lakers or Celtics would just kill them.
Destroy them. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it wouldn't even be close. So it's one of those that the recency fallacy hits a lot of people really hard. And a lot of that's because a lot of these fans weren't around to watch the teams in the past. I mean, the 1995-96 Bulls would beat every one of the teams that are playing now.
Absolutely.
They would.
And you compare the Cavaliers, for example,
Yeah.
to the Boston Celtics from the 80s. Now, I'm going to take Bird over LeBron, but if you want, we'll call that a push.
Yeah.
Okay?
Healthy Larry Bird is an underrated player.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to take McHale and Parrish over whoever their counterparts are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take Dennis Johnson over whoever his counterpart is. The only place where I think you get a clear victory, perhaps for Cleveland, is with Kyrie Irving over Danny Ainge.
Yeah, I think if you looked at it, even if you gave them LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, which I think you could argue that. I mean, that could be an arguable point. I think the skill set of the other three players is massively higher, and the differential between Ainge and Irving and LeBron and a healthy young Larry Bird is not that great. So you got to.
And I take Bird regardless because he's a better shooter.
Yeah, no, you're
And
absolutely right.
statistically, he's a better rebounder
and
better shooter.
The game has changed so much. I couldn't put LeBron James into the 1980s NBA because as physical as LeBron James is now, he would be hurt. He would be done. He would probably play for 3 years. Now, he'd be really, really good for 3 or 4 years. But the physical nature of the NBA in the early 80s, there would be none of this, flying in and nobody trying to stop you. You would have guys whose job it was to make sure you didn't do that ever again. Now, was it dirty? Sure, it was dirty. The Rambus foul, that's a dirty play. Kevin McHale made his living by knocking the cream cheese out of people. That was his job. Bill Laimbeer did the same thing. And you do that to send a message. You do it to say, okay, you want to do this, that's fine. Know that it's going to take a physically taxing toll on you, and all I have to do is take a foul, and I've got 5 more. You know what I mean? That's just an incredible situation. I don't think people cannot compare the 80s basketball to today because they're so different. I don't think that today's players could physically handle the toll.
And there's about 10 more teams today than there was in the 80s, so the
A little
talent's
dilution,
watered
yeah.
down.
Now, you counter that by saying there are more European players, and there's a lot of talent coming from overseas, and there is.
True.
But, it's just a different animal. I mean, it really is tough.
That concludes this edition of the Improbability Engine.